The NFL has a way of exposing everything. No matter how much hype, talent, or reputation a player carries into the league, the truth always surfaces once the pressure starts to rise. And right now, inside the Cleveland Browns organization, that pressure is building faster than anyone expected. What was supposed to be a quiet offseason, a time for development and internal competition, has suddenly turned into a full-blown storyline that's grabbing attention across the league. But the most surprising part? This entire situation didn't start with a bad game, a costly mistake, or even a locker room blow-up. It started with something much more subtle, just a few carefully chosen words that carried far more weight than they seemed on the surface. When Todd Monken addressed the media, there was no dramatic tone, no direct call-outs, and no obvious signs that anything was wrong. It sounded like a standard update, something you'd expect from any coach during the offseason. But if you listened closely, there was an edge to it, a message hidden between the lines. He didn't need to name names, and that's exactly what made it hit harder. By pointing out that certain players had been consistently showing up, putting in the work, and staying locked in, he indirectly revealed that others hadn't. And in a league where every detail is magnified, that kind of statement doesn't just fade away. It sparks questions, creates tension, and forces people to start connecting dots that maybe weren't so obvious before. Almost instantly, the conversation shifted toward two quarterbacks who now find themselves at the center of this storm: Shedeur and Dillon Gabriel. On one side, you have a player who's reportedly been in the facility day after day, quietly building trust, putting in extra hours, and doing everything possible to prove he belongs. On the other side, you have a player whose absence has started to become impossible to ignore. And in the NFL, being unseen can sometimes speak louder than anything you say publicly. There are no official statements, no confirmed issues, but that silence, it's starting to feel louder with every passing day, fueling speculation and raising questions about commitment, mindset, and what's really happening behind closed doors. What makes this situation even more intense is that it's no longer just about talent or potential, it's about perception, effort, and the kind of culture this team is trying to build moving forward. Because when a coach sends a message like that, it's not just for the media, it's for the entire locker room. It's a signal that things are changing, that past achievements don't guarantee future opportunities, and that the only thing that truly matters now is who's willing to show up and earn it every single day. And as this story continues to unfold, one thing is already becoming clear. This isn't just a quarterback battle anymore. It's the beginning of a shift that could redefine the entire direction of the franchise. For all the talk about potential and pedigree, the reality starts to look very different when you actually break down the numbers. And for Dillon Gabriel, that's where things begin to fall apart. Because on paper, he came in with the reputation of being polished, experienced, and ready to handle the speed of the NFL. The expectation was simple: steady production, smart decisions, and the ability to elevate the offense. But once the season unfolded, that version of him never truly showed up. Instead, what the stats revealed was a quarterback struggling to find rhythm, struggling to maintain consistency, and at times struggling just to keep the offense afloat. The efficiency wasn't there. A completion rate hovering near the bottom tier isn't just a minor issue, it's a red flag, especially in a league where precision is everything. Drives stalled before they could even develop, and the offense often looked disconnected whenever he was under center. And then there's the production itself. The yardage numbers didn't just fall short, they were alarmingly low for someone expected to compete at the highest level. Touchdowns were scarce, while pressure seemed to follow him on nearly every dropback. And when the pocket started collapsing, so did the confidence, leading to decisions that only made things worse. What really stands out, though, is the imbalance between risk and reward. Turnover-worthy plays started to pile up, while game-changing throws were almost non-existent. That's the kind of ratio that keeps coaches up at night, because it doesn't just hurt drives, it shifts momentum and puts the entire team in difficult positions. Analysts began to take notice, grading his performances near the bottom of the league, and once those evaluations went public, the narrative started to change quickly. This wasn't just a rough stretch anymore, it was becoming a pattern. And that's where the pressure intensifies, because in the NFL, numbers don't just tell a story, they shape opportunities, they influence trust, they determine who gets the next chance and who starts losing ground. So while the conversation outside focused on competition and potential, internally, those stats were quietly stacking up against him, and the more they did, the harder it became to justify giving him the benefit of the doubt. But as concerning as the performance was, there was something else happening behind the scenes that made the situation even harder to ignore. Someone else was starting to separate in a completely different way. Numbers can raise questions, but effort answers them. And inside the Cleveland Browns facility, the gap between the two has started to become impossible to ignore. Because while Dillon Gabriel was trying to hold on to his position based on what he had already shown, Shedeur Sanders was building something entirely different, something that doesn't show up on stat sheets but carries just as much weight in a locker room. Presence, consistency, daily commitment, the kind of things coaches notice immediately and teammates never forget. It's not about one workout or one appearance, it's about the pattern. Day after day, Sanders has reportedly been in the building, putting in the work when cameras aren't rolling and headlines aren't being written. Early mornings, extra reps, time spent in the film room, those small, repetitive actions that don't go viral, but slowly build credibility within a team. And in a league where everyone is talented, those details are often what separate the ones who last from the ones who fade. Because when everything else is equal, effort becomes the deciding factor. Meanwhile, the silence around Dillon Gabriel's off-season presence has only made the contrast sharper. There's no confirmed explanation, no clear narrative from his side, just an absence that continues to raise eyebrows. And in an environment built on competition, being unavailable doesn't just pause your progress, it allows someone else to take your place. Teammates notice who's grinding beside them. Coaches notice who's investing in the system, and over time, that starts to influence more than just depth charts. It shapes leadership, belief inside the locker room. What makes this shift even more powerful is how quietly it's happening. There's no official announcement declaring a new leader, no dramatic moment where everything changes overnight. Instead, it's a gradual shift in perception. A realization among players that one quarterback is treating every offseason day like it matters, while the other seems to be drifting further from the conversation. And once that perception sets in, it's incredibly difficult to reverse, because in the NFL, effort isn't just respected, it's expected.
And just like that, the conversation starts to evolve. It's no longer just about who has the better arm or the higher ceiling. It becomes about who the team can rely on when things get tough. Who's earned the right to lead? And as that question begins to echo louder inside the building, another layer of this situation starts to surface, one that suggests this competition may not have been as fair as it seemed from the outside. But just when it seemed like this was simply a case of one player outworking another, a more complicated narrative began to surface, one that goes beyond effort and dives into what might have been happening behind closed doors. Because around the Cleveland Browns, there's been quiet but persistent chatter that this quarterback situation didn't unfold as naturally as it looks now. Reports and online discussions have suggested that under former head coach Kevin Stefanski, the competition may not have been entirely balanced. To be clear, nothing has been officially confirmed, but the speculation has been strong enough to keep the conversation alive. Some believe that opportunities were carefully managed, reps distributed in a way that favored certain players while limiting others from gaining real momentum. It's been said that timing, play calling, and even situational usage may have played a role in shaping how each quarterback was perceived. Again, these are claims and not proven facts, but in a league where small advantages can define careers, even the idea of uneven opportunity is enough to raise serious questions. Because if one player is being held back, even slightly, it can completely change how their development is judged from the outside. What makes these rumors more intriguing is how they connect to what's happening now. With Todd Monken stepping in and emphasizing accountability and effort, it feels like a direct shift away from anything that resembles favoritism or internal politics. His message has been consistent: earn your role, prove your value, and nothing will be handed to you. And whether intentional or not, that approach is being interpreted by many as a reset button for the entire locker room, a chance to strip away old narratives and finally let performance and commitment decide who rises. If there was any truth to the idea that certain players were previously protected, that protection appears to be gone now, and that changes everything. Because once the playing field levels out, excuses disappear. The spotlight gets sharper. Every rep matters more, and for players who may have relied on past systems or perceived advantages, this new environment can feel unforgiving. It forces a level of accountability that not everyone is ready for. At the same time, for someone like Shedeur Sanders, this shift could be exactly what opens the door. If the rumors hold even a small degree of truth, then what we're seeing now might not just be a breakout, it might be a correction. A situation where a player who was once limited is finally getting the chance to prove what he can really do when nothing is standing in his way. And if that's the case, then this quarterback battle isn't just about the present, it's about undoing the past. But while these internal whispers continue to circulate, the story outside the building has taken on a completely different tone, and not everyone is seeing this situation the same way. While things inside the Cleveland Browns building seem to be shifting in one direction, the story being told outside couldn't feel more different, because as Shedeur Sanders continues to build quiet momentum through work and consistency, a large portion of the media has locked onto an entirely separate narrative, one that has little to do with what's actually happening on the field or in the facility. Instead of focusing on his development or presence, the conversation has often been dominated by labels. Words like arrogant or entitled get thrown around, shaping public perception before many have even seen him take meaningful snaps at this level. It didn't start recently either. From the moment he entered the spotlight, there's been a tendency to scrutinize everything about him: his confidence, his demeanor, even the way he carries himself off the field. Some of it stems from expectations, some of it from the attention he naturally draws, and some of it, according to online discussions, comes from the fact that he doesn't fit the traditional mold people are used to. There's been a lot of buzz online suggesting that his personality rubs certain critics the wrong way. And while those opinions aren't based on anything concrete, they've still managed to gain traction. The result is a narrative that feels pre-written, one where every action is interpreted through a negative lens before it's even understood. What makes these contrasts so striking is how disconnected it feels from what teammates and coaches are reportedly seeing every day. Inside the building, the focus is on effort, preparation, and accountability, areas where Sanders is quietly checking every box. But outside, the conversation continues to circle around perception instead of performance. A workout clip becomes a talking point, a confident quote becomes a headline, and suddenly the story shifts away from football entirely. It's not about what he's doing, it's about how people feel about what he represents.
And yet, that pressure doesn't seem to be slowing him down. If anything, it's having the opposite effect. Every criticism, every assumption, every attempt to define him without context appears to be adding fuel rather than creating doubt. Instead of responding publicly or trying to reshape the narrative, he's letting his actions do the talking. Showing up, putting in the work, and letting the people who matter most form their own opinions. In a way, that contrast is becoming part of the story itself, a player being questioned from the outside while steadily gaining respect on the inside. But as this divide between perception and reality continues to grow, it's starting to lead into an even bigger question. Because if the situation inside the team is shifting this clearly, what does that mean for the other side of the quarterback battle? And more importantly, how long before that tension forces a major decision? As the gap between perception and reality keeps widening, the conversation around Dillon Gabriel has started to take a more serious turn. It's no longer just about performance or off-season presence, it's about what comes next. Because whenever a player begins to lose ground in a competition like this, especially in today's NFL, one question always follows: do they stay and fight, or do they start looking for a way out? And lately, there's been growing buzz, nothing officially confirmed but widely discussed, that Gabriel could be considering his options if things continue trending in this direction. That kind of speculation doesn't come out of nowhere. In a league where careers can shift almost overnight, players and their camps are constantly evaluating situations.
If the environment starts to feel uncertain, or if the path to a starting role begins to close, the idea of a fresh start can become very real. Reports and fan discussions have suggested that with Todd Monken now emphasizing accountability and competition, any sense of security Gabriel may have once had is gone. And if that's the case, it would explain why trade rumors, even at this early stage, are starting to circulate. But here's where things get complicated. Leaving doesn't automatically solve the problem. In fact, it can sometimes magnify it. Because if the concerns are tied to performance, consistency, or commitment, those questions don't disappear. They follow. Any new team would be looking at the same tape, the same numbers, the same offseason narrative. And in a league that prioritizes availability and effort as much as talent, the perception of stepping away from competition can raise even more eyebrows than staying and fighting through it. At the same time, the pressure inside the Cleveland Browns organization is only increasing. With another quarterback steadily gaining traction through visible work and internal support, the margin for error is shrinking fast. What might have once been a wide-open battle is starting to feel more one-sided, at least in terms of momentum. And when momentum shifts in the NFL, it rarely slows down, it accelerates. So now Gabriel finds himself at a crossroads. Stay, compete, and try to reclaim control of the narrative, or explore a new opportunity and risk confirming the doubts already forming around him. Neither path is easy, and both come with consequences that could define the next phase of his career. But as the speculation continues to build, one thing is becoming clear. This situation isn't just about who wins the starting job anymore, it's about who's willing to handle the pressure that comes with losing it. And while all of that unfolds, something even more powerful is happening quietly in the background, because inside that locker room, the decision might already be making itself. At a certain point, battles like this stop being about depth charts and start becoming something much harder to measure. Inside the Cleveland Browns locker room, a different kind of competition is unfolding, one that has nothing to do with official announcements and everything to do with perception, trust, and respect. Because long before a coach names a starter, the players in that room begin to form their own opinions. They watch everything. Who shows up early? Who stays late? Who puts in the extra reps when nobody is asking them to? And over time, those small observations turn into something powerful, a quiet consensus about who they're willing to follow when things get tough. Right now, that psychological shift is becoming harder to ignore. On one side, you have Shedeur, who has been steadily building credibility through consistency, not through speeches or headlines, but through actions that repeat day after day. Teammates see that, they feel it, and in a league where respect isn't given freely, that kind of presence starts to carry serious weight. It creates a sense of reliability, an understanding that when the pressure hits, this is someone who's already proven he's willing to put in the work alongside everyone else. On the other, the uncertainty around Dillon Gabriel continues to linger, and in an environment built on accountability, uncertainty can be just as damaging as poor performance. It creates hesitation, it opens the door for doubt, and once doubt enters a locker room, it spreads quickly, because players aren't just thinking about talent, they're thinking about who they can trust in critical moments. Who's going to be there when the game is on the line, not just physically, but mentally locked in and prepared.
What makes this dynamic so intense is how quietly it develops. There's no meeting where the team votes on a leader, no announcement that signals a change. It happens in conversations, in shared workouts, in those early mornings when only a few players are in the building. That's where leadership is really decided. And right now, it feels like that decision is slowly tilting in one direction. Not because anyone declared it, but because one player is consistently earning it, while the other is leaving questions unanswered. This is where the real battle is being won, not in front of cameras, not in headlines, but in the minds of the players who will ultimately decide who they believe in when the season begins. Because when things start to fall apart during a game, they won't be looking at stats or past achievements. They'll be looking toward the person they trust the most. And once that trust is established, it's incredibly difficult to take it back. So while the outside world debates narratives and speculates about the future, inside that locker room, something much more definitive is happening. A leader is emerging, and if that trend continues, the final decision might not feel like a decision at all. It might feel like the only possible outcome.
But as this entire situation continues to unfold, there's a bigger question that keeps coming up, and it has less to do with football and more to do with perception. Why does it feel like so many people are rooting against Shedeur Sanders before he's even had a real chance to prove himself at this level? Because the criticism hasn't just been about performance or competition, it's been personal, persistent, and in some cases, completely disconnected from what's actually happening inside the Cleveland Browns building. And when you step back and look at it, the intensity of that reaction starts to feel unusual. Some of it, according to online discussions and media takes, seems to come from the way he carries himself. He's confident, visible, and unapologetic about it. But in today's NFL, that shouldn't be shocking. Confidence is almost a requirement of the quarterback position. Still, there's been a noticeable pattern where that confidence gets framed differently in his case. Instead of being seen as leadership or belief, it's often labeled as arrogance. And while those labels are subjective, the consistency of that narrative suggests there's more driving it than just on-field evaluation. It's been said that players who don't fit the traditional mold, quiet, reserved, media-friendly, often face a different kind of scrutiny, and Sanders seems to be right in the middle of that conversation. There's also the reality of expectations. When a player enters the league with attention already surrounding them, every move gets magnified. Every post, every comment, every moment becomes part of a larger story that people are eager to define. In Sanders' case, that spotlight has created a situation where perception is forming faster than reality. A single clip can turn into a headline, a confident moment can turn into a talking point, and before long, a narrative starts to build that doesn't always match what teammates and coaches are actually experiencing firsthand. What's even more interesting is how that external pressure seems to be shaping his approach. Instead of pushing back publicly or trying to change how he's viewed, he's leaning further into the one thing he can control, his work. And that contrast is becoming impossible to ignore. While the outside conversation focuses on image, the inside reality continues to revolve around effort, preparation, and consistency. And the more those two worlds drift apart, the more it raises questions about which version of the story is actually real. At the end of the day, situations like this often say as much about the environment as they do about the player, because when criticism becomes this intense this early, it forces people to ask whether it's truly about performance or something deeper tied to expectations, bias, or discomfort with change. And if that's the case, then this isn't just about one quarterback trying to win a job. It's about a shift in how players are viewed, how narratives are created, and who gets the benefit of the doubt. And if Shedeur Sanders continues on this path, using every doubt as motivation, there's a real chance that this entire narrative could flip in a way no one saw coming. Because in the NFL, perception can change quickly, but only when performance forces it to. And if that moment is coming, it won't just silence critics, it will redefine the entire story. And now, everything points to one unavoidable reality. This isn't just a competition anymore, it's a transition. What started as a quiet off-season battle inside the Cleveland Browns has slowly evolved into something much bigger, a clear shift in identity, leadership, and direction. Without making a dramatic announcement, Todd Monken has already set the tone. His message wasn't about potential, hype, or past achievements, it was about presence, effort, and accountability. And in doing so, he may have already revealed exactly where this team is heading.
Because when a coach emphasizes who's showing up instead of who's supposed to be the star, it changes everything. It strips away reputation and forces every player to stand on what they're doing right now. And in that kind of environment, only one thing matters: consistency. Right now, Shedeur Sanders is building that case day by day, quietly stacking trust, earning respect, and positioning himself is more than just another name in the quarterback room. He's becoming the player that teammates look toward, not because they're told to, but because his actions are making that decision for them. At the same time, the uncertainty surrounding Dillon Gabriel continues to grow. Whether it's performance, absence, or the swirling speculation about his future, the margin for error is disappearing fast. And in a league that moves as quickly as the NFL, once momentum shifts, it rarely swings back without a fight. The question now
isn't just whether he can compete, it's whether he can completely reset the narrative before it's too late. What makes this moment so important is that it feels like the end of one chapter in the beginning of another. The Browns are no longer operating on what players were expected to be, they're reacting to what they are right now. And that kind of mindset doesn't just change a depth chart, it reshapes a franchise. It builds a culture where effort defines opportunity, and where leadership is earned through action, not assumed through reputation. As the season approaches, the spotlight is only going to get brighter. Every practice, every rep, every decision will carry more weight. Will Gabriel respond and fight his way back into the conversation, or has the shift already gone too far to reverse? And for Sanders, the challenge is about to reach a completely different level, because stepping into the role is one thing, but proving you can carry it when the games begin is something else entirely. One thing, however, is already clear. The balance of power inside that locker room is changing, and if the current trajectory holds, we may be witnessing the early stages of a new era in Cleveland, one built not on expectations, but on who's willing to show up and take it.